So now we can start with color. On my palette at this moment I have titanium white, azo yellow, medium, burnt umber, pyrrole red and ultramarine blue. I first want to start with the color of the walls. This one is more brownish than this one. This is more light yellow. If you compare it with just regular yellow, this is way more brownish, gray brownish. So first thing I'm gonna do is just try to match that color. So I've got a little bit of yellow. Okay, it's too the tonal value is quite right, but you see it lacks a little bit of something. First I'm gonna try what happens if I add a little bit of burnt umber to make it a little bit more brown. So we get this. Okay, that leans a little bit too much to the green now, my yellow, you see, so I'll add a little bit of red as well. It's maybe a little bit too much, it's no problem. So it gets more orangey, but that's no problem. Tonal value is quite right, to be honest. Now it's a little bit too orangey, so what can I do to make it less orangey, less vivid? Add a little touch of ultramarine blue. Because ultramarine blue is the only complementary color, the only primary color that is missing in this mixture. Further dull it down a little bit with a little bit of titanium white. Now it's less saturated than that color, it's more brown orangey. It's still a little bit too saturated. Well, then we just add slightly more ultramarine blue. And chances are that now it gets a little bit too green. That's no problem. Then we can add a little bit more of red again. It's almost there. It needs a little touch of red. Pyrrole red. That's quite alright. Now here it is a little bit lighter and here it's a little bit darker, so for over here I add slightly more yellow. White, sorry, titanium white. See, that's more like that. It is rather good. So that's that. Now I'm gonna paint. And if everything is right, if we did it right the first time, the tonal value will be quite the same as what we do now, and you will see that makes the painting process easier. That tonal value is already there. That gives a sort of foundation for this color, you see? And of course later on I paint the dark leaves on top of this color again. But here we go. I just, I drop it down up till here a little bit. Well, maybe we do it just like this. Just add that color, and when I'm getting more downward like this, then I start adding, I just wipe a little bit. I wipe the brush a little bit clean, and then I get this lighter color out. So there we go. Up till the sign. Oh, I destroyed the sign a little bit there. And now I get close to the darker value. Then I start blending it a little bit like this. I also want to add slightly more red still. It's a little bit too green. So there we go. I just add it like this. And these spots, I just grab a little bit of burnt umber, so in the bristles, and I just wipe that in the paint a little bit like this. But you see, the tonal value almost stays the same, how light or dark it is, and the color as well. So it's almost the same color, but now you get the feeling that the wall is a little bit stained. Like that. So, but that's enough already. What do we see here? In the tree, the color gets reflected, the color of the wall, you see? So let's grab this yellow stuff and put it on the tree at this side already. And that's funny, that's that lighter value that we made there, and from here on it gets darker, more grayish brown. So, but that's fun. We already have that color for this part. Also, I see this same color coming back at some spots in the background. I just drop it at some spots, especially over here. But it's slightly lighter. So I add a little bit more white. See, over here. There we have that. Now, and then we head over to the other side. This yellow wall, this is a little bit different color, or quite a bit different color. Let's see what we can do. If we take a touch of white again, and then just mix this, then this color gets lighter, but it's a little bit too brown, so I add more of the yellow. Check, check, check. And now it's a little bit too red, so I'll add a slight touch of ultramarine blue. And that's due to, we have yellow, red and blue, and that are 3 primary colors, and 3 primary colors will make for a dulled down color. Yeah, I put it, it's difficult. My painting casts a shadow on the photograph, so then I cannot see very clearly what I'm doing. I think it can, well, it can use a tiny bit of yellow still, and it has to be a little bit darker, so I've added a little bit too much white, so I add more yellow and more red, and then I need more blue as well, I think, yeah. So a slight touch of ultramarine blue does the trick. So, there you have it again. You see, that's what we talked about earlier. A lot of colors, even though they look very colorful, in reality are quite neutral, toned down, made gray. And still it looks very colorful. So I leave it like this. We can make variations as we go. And it's background stuff, so I don't want to be too precise about everything. So there we go. Yep, like this. And you see, that covers very nicely, because that gray underneath it shines through a little bit, and that gives the foundation for this tonal value. It's just nice to know that the tonal values are already in place. You only have to put the color on top, and you have a very useful kind of sketch in grayscale. And that makes it very easy to finish your painting. There we go. Details we can add later. Here it is slightly darker. Course. And then over there I'll just need a smaller brush for that little part. Here you see that shadow is a little bit more like this kind of stuff, I think. Yeah, so this color that we use there, we can use it over here as well. Might be even slightly darker. Then we have this rusty stuff. So I'll just take a little bit of red, pyrrole red, and a little bit of burnt umber, and a little bit of yellow. I get a little bit of a brownish orangey color, and I drop that to the side a little bit like this. Not too much, a little bit. Maybe here a little bit as well. And that's enough, I think. So let me adjust this color here with a little bit of titanium white for this part. See, it's lighter and it contains a little bit more blue as well. So there we go, this color over here, and there are all kinds of variations. So first let me drop this color down. There we go. And then here we have some more intense yellow. I just grab a little bit more of this at some spots. So you see, you hardly see it, but that's on the photograph the same story. So a little bit of this. And here it gets a little bit darker and a little bit gray. So I add more yellow, more blue and more red, like this. And I check a little bit. Yes, okay. So there we go, shadow part. And then we have kind of gray color there in between. So I'll grab a bit of burnt umber and ultramarine blue. More towards the burnt umber side. So then I have my own nice kind of gray. And now it lacks a little bit of red. So I'll add a little bit of red. See? These small parts I just do on the fly with the brush. The mixing. Because I can do it with the palette knife as well, of course, but that's no use. And now you see here a little bit of cast shadow. So there we make it darker. A little bit of this gray, I make it slightly lighter. And that's the tonal value story again. Just look at this. Here you have that yellow, but on top of that yellow it gets a little bit grayish. You see more of that, the paint is gone there, and it gets a little bit grayish. So I'll add that here as well, but it's ever so slightly, and the tonal value of this is almost the same as that. So you hardly see the difference in the painting, and that's great because in the photo you also hardly see the difference. Now let's quickly head over to this thing, because I think I can grab a lot of white and a bit of ultramarine blue and a little bit of burnt umber. I've already got burnt umber in my brush. So now I get a gray kind of color. I'm gonna check. It's not blue enough, you see, so I add more ultramarine, like this. Yeah, that's rather good. It may have a little touch of yellow as well. And now you see it's almost, it's the same tonal value as we had in our underpainting, but the color shifts now. Now it gets a little bit of color. You hardly see it because it's a very light color, but it is there. And here, when we go up, it gets a little bit warmer. So I just take a little bit of this warmer gray and mix that through this. Be sure to make the tonal value a little bit the same. So you see, here is a slight shift from cooler to slightly warmer on that white. You hardly see it, but it is there, and that is when you focus, when you want to paint realistically, and you don't have to do every tiny detail and spot, but the general idea of the photograph, if you stick to that, then you get a rather realistic image. Hopefully. We're not there yet. Now let's head over to this one. This is a different color than this. This is more warm. It is. Let us drop a little bit of burnt umber and ultramarine together to make a gray color. Add white. You see, now I have got a gray color. It's too dark. The tonal value isn't right. See, so I need to add more white. And check, check, check. That's better. We're not there yet. Still, it needs a little bit of white. Okay, check, check, check. That's good. But now you see my gray lacks a little bit of warmth. And so I can add a slight touch of burnt umber to make it slightly warmer. Check on the side and you see that's great. Okay? And I'm not gonna paint every tiny detail that I see, but the general idea of that slightly warmer gray is there. And then of course here it gets slightly darker, so let's make it slightly darker, the gray. There we go. see, up in between the foliage, and add a little bit more brown there as well. And here we get more brownish kind of effect. So there you go. Now let's head over to this kind of strange color. It's a little bit brownish. Let's take this one. We have it on a palette. Throw that in the gray mixture. Just check, are we there? Now it lacks a tiny amount of red. So I add a little bit of red. Check again. Oh, good enough. And there we go. So that's that. This is rather neutral gray, so I add more ultramarine, especially here on the side. So this is a cooler kind of gray, little bit, relatively speaking, because it's all relatively, because you have colors next to each other. So a warm wall here, and then something else looks cooler already quickly. Now I add a tiny bit of yellow, of that yellow mixture that we've used here, and I'm gonna work that in these parts like this, a little bit like this. Then here we have more kind of, I think, a little bit more orangey stuff, so I add a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow. Let's check. Now I've got a rather, we're getting there, a little bit of blue to make it slightly duller. Well, that's good enough. So for this, you see, and now let's add a slight touch of burnt umber, very slightly, but you see, tonal values, I keep them close, rather close. It's maybe already a little bit too dark. So there we go. Now, and that's all I'm gonna do with that, because it's not that important. It's fun to have a little bit of colorful stuff over there. Now the shadows. So we have this shadow color here. You see that has a little bit of a brownish kind of feel to it. I'm gonna check what kind of color is that. If I use this, for instance, and I hold it next to, maybe I add a little bit of red and ultramarine. Kind of all right. So let's put that in, and you see that makes a difference. The tonal value again is about the same as what we had, but the cast shadow, of course, isn't just purely gray. It's a gray with color, so it's a kind of brownish. And again, here around the side of this cracked stucco, there is that color as well, you see? So it's not a black line. No, it's a line with color. Then I head over to these stones. Well, you see, all kinds of gray, a little bit like this. I'm just gonna do that very quickly. I just want to get over with it. And the tonal values are most important. I use red, yellow, and white to make it lighter. You see that now I've got quite a rather pinkish kind of color. That's of course ridiculous. So that's no problem. I add the third primary color, then I get something like this. Is that useful? Well, for some parts it's almost useful. Let's add a little bit of this stuff to it. Let's check again. That's better. Okay, see? So the tonal value is about the same, and I just start blocking in this kind of color, and later on I will add different things. So a little bit of this here, like that. That's the pavement. Now there's a little bit of this, that step. Slightly more burnt umber, and also a little touch of ultramarine to make it slightly more gray. But here you have this, this is a little bit darker. So, and this is more definitely more dark and a little bit more grayish. See there, this spot, for instance. So, up, there we go. Just yeah, take the reference photo and say to yourself, okay, I just want to add a little bit of this yellowish stuff over here, just a tiny bit, very tiny bit. A little bit more of blue now, I think. Here, as you see, so. Oh, here this, I forgot to do that thing. So, blue, burnt umber for a nice kind of grey. What kind of grey is that? A little bit? A little bit more towards the blue side, you see. Again, tonal value was already there. The color changes now a little bit. Maybe it can use a little bit of red. I just drop the red in it while I go. And then we have more of lighter stuff and more colorful stuff there on top. So like that. And here as well. And well, I'll grab a little bit of white. You see, but I keep all the colors, the tonal values are more or less right. This is also the top here, especially this one is a little bit more bluish gray. So there we go. And then another important thing are these shadows. So, burnt umber, ultramarine, make a slightly darker gray. And here. So you did see these lines, these gray lines. Now these gray lines get kind of the same tonal value, but they get a color as well. Now let's do these bars over there. Oh, maybe it's better to use a palette knife now. So I'll just grab all these colors together. There we go. It's starting to dry because it's very hot at the moment here in the Netherlands. I add a lot of blue. So because all these colors are together, you get a kind of gray, so that you can reuse them. You see, my color is almost good of tonal value, but it lacks still a little bit of blue. So more ultramarine. And at some spots it contains a little bit more red as well. So I just take a little bit of red and I change a small part of the mixture over here. And then we have these dark lines. Now we'll do them later on. There we go with the color. Well, here in the back we don't see it, of course. Later on we'll paint the foliage on top of this, but let's just fill it with these strokes. Up till there, I guess. See, that's fun, eh? Almost same tonal value, but it looks different now because we've added color. Then I add at some spots that little bit of that more red feel to it. So I just wipe that over slightly. You see, hardly any difference in tonal value and color. But now, by doing this, it looks a little bit more shiny. I get a lot of ultramarine blue and a little bit of burnt umber, a little bit of red maybe also. And a little bit of this mixture, just to make it slightly lighter. So the small flat brush. And now I'm trying to concentrate a little bit. I'll just make a single stroke everywhere, I don't care. I also want to make a little bit of lighter parts on it. So I grab a little bit of white, I mix that through that mixture of that light blue color, that light grayish blue. And now at some spots I want to make it slightly lighter as well. But there as well you get the sense, and at some spots, for example, I can add slight touch of red as well, so like this, you see? See, you hardly see it, but it does something. It makes it look more vibrant. I show it also because it is to show that as long as you stay in the same tonal value and you alter only the color a little bit, then you get very nice special effects. So that sign is a little bit of this color with a little bit of white, I think. Yeah, it's good enough. You see, so there we go. Again. Then that sign is, of course, red, the outer ring, but it is very desaturated. So I add a lot of white and a tiny amount of ultramarine to make it less vivid. I think that's enough. So for this, so it's more towards pink. And that blue, well, we don't have the right blue, in fact, because it's a little bit more neutral blue, but I just use a little bit of ultramarine blue. I don't care. There we go. It's background stuff, but it's nice background stuff. Oh, quickly, before I forget, these fellows. Let's see, you have all kind of grays on your palette, so you can do everything you like. Here it gets more red, but not too red, so I add a little bit of, how you call it, ultramarine as well, like this. There we have kind of gray, I guess, something like this, a little bit of red in it. So ultramarine and burnt umber, and you see, I turn that same value into kind of a colored gray. Now, here and there we have this kind of gray here sticking out of the paint. Over there, over here, it's a little bit too dark. This is a little bit lighter, so I'll just grab a little bit more white in it, and I just do it like this. That's a little bit too light. So, lightest parts. And later on I will try to fix it and connect it a little bit. But for now, this is the base, you see? Now I have to connect it a little bit. So the gray here can be made slightly lighter. Here this can be made slightly darker at some spots. And here it gets more colorful. That's a little bit of this. I add that to the mixture here. Just a little bit. And here we get to also more colorful stuff. A little bit more burnt umber maybe here down at the bottom. And this is rather dark gray, so burnt umber, ultramarine mixing, and up. There we go. On top of the stuff that's already there. Oh, maybe I do it like this. Here we have, from the rain, the rust from that broken door is a little bit of this kind of color, I think. It's a nice kind of detail to put in the painting. At least I like it. And now I grab a little bit of burnt umber. So for in the center I can make it a slightly more brown. So I think that's fun. A little bit of gray for this crack over here. This is a little bit too hard. And this can be made softer by adding a gray that connects these two values, like that. These yellow things, I don't need them anymore, and it's already a little bit dry. Well, it's a kind of a brownish. What kind of color gray is it? I don't know. Let's see. Just grab some burnt umber, ultramarine. Same old story always. Burnt umber, ultramarine, or of course, because there's in the gray mixing set, you can of course also use gray, neutral gray for instance, or a warm gray if you need a warm gray. For instance, this one, this warm gray, might have been a good base for these stones. Could have used that, I forgot it a little bit, but that's the same. Yeah, okay, especially if I'm gonna combine all these things, that's great. And then also I want to make that dark shadow color, or is this also good for that dark shadow? Oh, this is a little bit too light, so a little bit of ultramarine and burnt umber, and slight touch of white. We can, for instance, start with, well, the global colors. Let's take that dark color first for here. I just do it like this. That at other spots as well. Yes, a little bit over here for, I guess, on that panel. A little bit. So this is just a kind of for a base. Oh, and maybe here. There I can use that very dark color that I just made. And here. Well, okay, so first let me do the panels now. So we've got something like this. See the magic trick? Again, the gray turns into a color, but we get a lot of support from the gray background. And we can rather quickly see if we're doing things right, if it's going in the right direction. So first I do this rather brownish color, and then later on I will add that more bluish color. Because we can do it like this, who cares? There we go. And well, now that we're at it, I do it here as well. On top of this, I guess, or I mix it a little bit. So I do a little bit of dry brush, so with a little bit of paint, because I want to mix it with other colors as well in a moment. And it's just a matter of jump in the process of painting, just dare to paint, and then as you go you solve the problems that you encounter. Now I get to this gray color. I'm very curious. And I just mix it at some spots, so like this. I think that is great, but I don't know, I'm not sure yet. So I think that's good. Yeah, so it mixes a little bit with the color that's already there. Here as well. And I keep it on the panel. And then I do these strokes here, I do a little bit like that, you see? Again, I use the patterns and the things that I see a little bit to do my own thing. Now, and I see that at some spots we can even add a little bit more light, maybe. So I add more white, for here for instance, like this. And here a little bit, here in these kind of, patterns. Then there I see a little bit more of bluish stuff going on, so ever so slightly. I just use the same colors, the same tonal values almost, you see. And I just add that. So it only alters it a little bit. Okay, Now I'm gonna take this dark paint see these lines, I prefer to do them a little bit too light over too dark, because I can always make them even darker, but the other way around is more difficult. And this one, oh, okay, let's make a door of this one. So now I'm gonna do the tree a little bit. I can use this gray mixture to make this color here. This is good, and then there it gets very dark, so I use a lot of ultramarine and a bit of burnt umber to make a very dark. So very dark, there's very dark, and then it gets lighter. You see, so, and then here this is a kind of, yeah, a grayish color. Let's check. It needs to be lighter. That is the same as what we did last time. Outside here is lighter. So, and this is a little bit darker, huh? Here in the middle. Here, oh, that's way too dark. Don't mind. A little bit darker. Then we go there. This is a little bit darker as well, of course, here. So we already have that dark color, but now we've given it color. There we go. With a little bit of black, I'm gonna paint these leaves again. And I mix that with a little bit of yellow. And I get a very, very dark green color, greenish kind of color. So it has a little bit of a green color shift. And now I'll drop in some of these leaves again, these dark parts, with a rather small flat brush. And I try to look at the pattern a little bit that I see. So it's just to have a dark background, and then I can put those light leaves on top of it later on. See, so like this. Here we see a lot of, well, there can add a little bit more of white and a little bit of brown, because there it is dark but not pure black. Here we just indicate these leaves, these dark leaves, and these light ones will come on top of it later. So. It's always fun to do, to work in these kind of layered things. Same thing you can do with, for instance, with fur, with an animal. Darker color first and then build lighter colors on top of it. Pavement I'm gonna do with the palette knife, and I'm gonna make one simple color mixture. Oh, look at this gray kind of color. What is that? That's rather good. Okay, just use that. I've just mixed these colors together. You see, it's the good kind of tonal value. And then there I'll use this more simple gray color. It's a little bit lighter there, so I add more white. Here again, it's the same tonal value. Now it contains more color, but I'm not gonna do every detail. I think I'll leave it like this. Maybe a little bit of another color here in here to indicate a little bit of the pavement. Maybe that's fun, maybe it isn't. And here we have some lighter bricks. Maybe I can indicate them a little bit like that, but that's enough. Now we're gonna focus on the car. And the car first, I think. The car is kind of an orangey color, so let's try to do the same as we did before. We make a dark color, a slightly lighter color, a color for the reflection here of the sky, and a very light color. First, let me mix a base color. So I grab a little pyrrole red and add a little bit of yellow to give it an orange feel. Now this color is too saturated. Now how do I make it less vivid? I add a little bit of blue color, the third primary, yellow, red, blue. And these aren't the exact primaries, because this blue, this ultramarine, contains a little bit of magenta, so it isn't a perfect primary, but this isn't a perfect primary either, and this also is not a perfect primary. But that doesn't matter. As long as we just use the three primaries, we can get there. So what happens then is that this color gets dulled down, this orange color, you see? I would say this is a perfect color for these light parts here, so maybe I'll save this a little bit for later. And I just make some more of this stuff. Now, and then it's a balancing act. Do I need more red? Do I need more blue? Do I need more yellow? We will see. We will try and compare. And oh wow, we're instantly very close this time. Then we have a slightly lighter variation on the roof, for instance, and here at the back. So, and we don't need a lot of paint for those parts. So I'll just make a slightly smaller pile this time. Let's see, that looks rather more orangey to me, so I'll add slightly more yellow. That's a little bit too orangey, so more red. Well, it's quite right, it's a little bit too vivid. So, again, a slight touch of ultramarine, but ever so slightly, because this is a lighter color than that, so it gets destroyed much quicker. Yeah, you see, that's already, for here it is great, but on top of the roof it's a little bit different. Well, then I just add a little bit more orange again to make it a little bit more vivid again. Yeah, it can be made slightly lighter with a little bit of yellow, and then a very tiny touch of white. So you can lighten colors with white, but sometimes you need a warmer lighter color, then you can lighten it with yellow as well. Yellow is also a light color, of course. So this is great. So now I have a dark, a slightly lighter, and then two lighter steps. Now it's time for the highlights. And it's a little bit hard to see what kind of color that is. But it will be a sort of a mixture of the color of the bodywork and the color of the sky. Let's use some red and a little bit of ultramarine. Then we get a purplish color. And if I add white, this is a bit of a desaturated purple, because this red already contains a little bit of yellow. The pyrrole red isn't magenta. Magenta is the primary. Pyrrole red, you can say, consists of magenta with a touch of primary yellow, theoretically speaking. So I just check here with a little bit of white if we're going in the right direction. We're going in the right direction, but can use a little bit more yellow. And then I can lighten it up again with a little bit of white. Can very well be that I need more blue. More ultramarine, just a touch. See, let's add some white again. Here it gets slightly warmer, so there I do a slight hint of yellow. I want to simplify it a little bit. I think this is good enough for the whole range. Yes, it is. And then here it gets slightly lighter, of course, so that's that. And then I add a little bit more white to make a slightly lighter version as well. And then we have the lightest parts. I take some white and I add a tiny amount of this mixture to that white, just to give it a little bit of color. And I'm gonna check. Yeah, and that can use a little bit of, let's take a little bit of orange from here, a little bit of warmth. There you go. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So now it's just a repetition of what we did earlier, but now in color. So I'll grab the round brush, that's easy. And you see that this is almost the same tonal value as what we already had. So that's good. At the moment it is exactly 30 degrees here in my studio. It's very, very hot. I'll use the same color for these parts. Again, the color shifts a little bit over there. But as painters, we simplify things as well. So there we go again. So you can also do funny things with underpaintings, of course. For instance, make a painting partially in color only. That's also what you could have done. You could also leave the background in grayscale, in gray, and then only paint the car in color. That's nice as well. Now the paint is still wet, I hope, because it's very hot. So therefore I just wipe my brush a little bit and quickly head over to the slightly lighter variation, so that it already gets a little bit lighter, a little bit warmer there on the top. You hardly see it, but it is there. And now that I'm at it with this color, I can do this for this again. You see this here is just a little bit warmer, a little bit lighter. Well, here it gets darker again, so now I stop with this color, I wipe it clean a little bit and then head over to the darker variation. So, yep. It would have been easier to grab a big brush, but on the other hand, we're almost there, so now I just continue with this smaller one. I just indicate it ever so slightly. That was dark, that's good. There we can get it a little bit lighter. Then here it is dark as well. So it's very handy that I already did this once. I can stick to those tonal values now. Tonal values that we've discovered in our underpainting. There we go. Hup, hup. I'll just indicate this a little bit. Now I get the slightly lighter variation again. This one, just here on top. It alters the look a little bit. Okay, now I get this light variation. And I do the same trick again here. So this curves towards us. So this catches a little bit more light. So that becomes more orangey. And from here it gets very light. And same goes for this fellow. So like that. Oops. Here we have that very dark part. I just grab some burnt umber and mix that through this already rather dark stuff. And there we go. Because burnt umber can be used very well to darken oranges and that kind of colors. Here it gets slightly lighter as well. Very dark shadowy color, and as soon as I run out of paint, like now, I just grab new one. So you see you get a nice kind of shadow color. So I get this one here. First just drop it at the right spot, and later on we can start to connect the color to the surrounding colors if that's necessary. But at this stage we just drop this color in and we don't contaminate the color on the palette. We just globally put this color everywhere, and later I will adjust it at some spots. Now I want to adjust it a little bit, so I mix this lighter variation, this one, with the dark variation, blend it a little bit at the edges with the previous colors, so that it gets less of a hard line. Okay, now I head back to this color and finish this part. Oops. And we go over here and here. All this kind of color, and over here I will start and make it a little bit lighter. So I just mix those two together, you see, and maybe a little bit of orange in it as well. So there we go. Drop it down here like this. Same color can be used for this part. Again, that was a little bit of dark kind of reflection, and then here I use that more pinkish color. That's for over here. It starts over there a little bit. That's rather light. Yeah. And same goes for here. And then I add that more warm yellowish light color at the side. Especially here. And a little bit also as well over here. And I drop that in and I mix it a little bit with what I already have. Then you automatically get kind of a transition. Here are some very light parts as well. So I grab this first for here. Oops. And this one here, this one. All in all, I haven't made the car orangey enough. But I don't know if that's a bad thing. Now we get this orange color. And here, and here, and this. The roof is rather kind of this orangey color. There we go. Here the front. Well, there I add a little bit of this more soft color to it. For here and here. And here it gets slightly more dark again. So and so. There we go. And on the roof, that's the same story. There is the lightest part. That's very, very light over there. So like this. And there. Now I'm gonna connect it with the light value, you see, so I blend them a little bit and it gets a little bit softer again. This has disappeared also in my sketch, in my painting, so I'll restore that quickly. Ultramarine and burnt umber. And I make a grey again for the roof, for this thing on the roof. There we are. So it's already dry, almost. So I'll quickly do a second layer. And I don't know what I've done wrong. Let's check. It should be quite right, this color. So let's put a second layer on top of it. Maybe that helps. Oh yes, it definitely helps. The window, that needs a little bit of yellow. So my yellow is gone. Because that reflects a little bit of the yellow of the wall. So I grab a little bit of yellow, I throw that through this orange mixture and I make it a little bit lighter. Then I compare, make it dull a little bit with a little bit of blue. And maybe it's handy to check it. Almost there. Good enough. So there we go. And I just do it a little bit like that. You see? It reflects a little bit. Here we see some yellow things in the bodywork reflected. So maybe it's nice to put them in as well. So like that. And then we have the silver things. So I grab a lot of white and I've burnt umber and ultramarine. And when I add a little bit more of blue, so like this, a gray that leans a little bit towards blue, so a cold gray, then I can easily do this bumper and this light here, so like this. I just indicate it a little bit, and here the color of the car gets reflected on the metal. So I add a little bit of this color, but I don't do all the details. I think that's already almost enough. I make a darker gray to make this bumper turn around. So there, and then the light. At the bottom of the light I make it slightly darker here, where it turns downwards. I grab a small flat brush for these kind of parts. Like this, I want to add a little bit more of white. Especially here. And here. Then we go like this. Here it gets a little bit more gray, bluish gray. So add more blue. So you see, here you see that it gets really brown. So I just use a lot of burnt umber and I just drop it around like this. But this is a little bit more suggestion work. I just do this a bit quickly. I don't want to go into the details too much. And the side of the bumper again here is a little bit more blue. And there it's a little bit warmer, so more brown and lighter, of course. And here it is very light at the edge. So I add more white and on top here, so like this. And here as well. And here, that's very light, but that's already enough, I think. This is a little bit too thick, so I'll restore this a little bit. You see, by painting the inside of the car again, here and there, I make these. So there we go. These lines, I do that with a little bit of burnt umber. I take this color and a little bit of burnt umber and then I start drawing these lines. Here it's a little bit darker again. Here it gets slightly lighter. So here slightly dark, then it goes that way. Well, here I'm not gonna do all these lines, but this one I can do. Here you see this gray that can become a little bit more brownish orange. Here we can make it darker, so I add a little bit of ultramarine and burnt umber. Till there. There it gets lighter again, so the burnt umber again I can use, because the burnt umber is a little bit closer to the color of the bodywork. And there it gets lighter, so now I just grab a slightly lighter variation. So, and there we hardly see the line. Now let's do the tires. Tires are already good as they are, almost. But on my photograph this contains a little bit more of a blue feel to it. And this tire over here. So I just add a little bit of a dark mixture of burnt umber and ultramarine. And now I make it lighter. Oh, that's a little bit too light. Here I just add slightly more blue as well. And there it disappears into the bodywork. So here I use ultramarine and burnt umber to make a very, very dark color, almost black. This can use a little bit of color as well. It is a little bit more brown. So I add more burnt umber. So almost the same tonal value. That's already there. But here I use a little bit more brown and here it gets a little bit darker. So, and going up here I add more ultramarine because there on top it gets more blue again. So warmer, cooler. what kind of gray is that? Slightly more towards blue. So that is this. And there it gets lighter, but you also see sort of yellowish stuff. So I mix this stuff in it here and there. And there. And here I see that a little bit as well. So just globally, not too specific, because I want to keep it a little bit loose. And so here I add a little bit of that lighter color. Here it is lighter in general. So there we go. And this, I get a little bit of white and a little bit of blue. I drop that down here. So I think I leave it like that for that instant. And now I go over to this side. Here on top it has a little bit of blue. I don't have the correct blue, but it's a little bit green. I can try to add a little bit of yellow. Greenish blue over there. Okay, you hardly see it. Maybe exaggerate it a little bit. Then there it gets a little bit more warmer towards this kind of color, a little bit more brownish, orangey. And here it gets slightly darker. So burnt umber, ultramarine, a little bit towards the warm side, I would guess. So like this. Okay, the tire itself, let's go over it with a dark color that has a little bit of a red feeling, strangely, a purple feeling to it. So I add a little bit of more ultramarine and a slight touch of red. So there we go. Maybe I need to do the inside a little bit better here. And the center of the wheel there. And here as well. And this darker stuff, maybe it's fun to do that. So there we go. And then I head over to the street, and the last thing I'm gonna do is paint the tree. The street, well, we need a little bit of a gray color. It's a little bit towards blue, I think. So again, burnt umber, ultramarine, and mixing, bit of white. There it gets slightly lighter. So you see, it has a little bit of a blue feel to it. And then of course we have that slightly lighter line again that we talked about in the previous video. So slightly. And from there the colors change. Cast shadow is a little bit brownish, so I add a little bit of burnt umber to that. Here a little bit of that brown, but also slightly lighter already. So here it's already a bit like this. Yep, okay. Then at the back side here it gets a little bit greenish, bluish, the cast shadow. And then, of course, it gets way lighter, the whole street. This kind of color. I think that is great. Okay, now let's head over to the tree. Last but not least, the tree. So the tree, we already have these dark colors, that's great. Now what I want to do is make some greens. I just make some space on my palette. I just use some permanent green, like that, and a little bit of yellow ochre. That's for the greens. Yes, white, yellow ochre, that's good. Okay, let's go. Let's pre-mix a little bit of colors for the leaves. So I have very light leaves, then therefore I put a little bit of paint over here. And to make it light, I will add a little bit of white in this case, because it's a little bit kind of a cool, light kind of color. You see, and it can contain a little bit of extra blue. So ultramarine. So I get a rather cool kind of light green color. That's good. I'll add a little bit of yellow ochre here for just another variation as well. Slightly darker. Yeah, that's also great. So, two kinds of light green. Then I want to have some darker green, so I'll just add some burnt umber to the green. Yeah, that's a great color to have, so I'll make more. We can use that. Another type of sort of middle green. Then I take that green and I'll add a little bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Want to dull it down a little bit. But this is a very kind of vivid green. And of course we need these flowers. For the flowers I'll use magenta, because with magenta I can make nice pink colors. Just look at this, watch this. How do you like that? And I think it can use a little bit of yellow, and I think it isn't that weird to exaggerate it a little bit. I think that would be nice. So I have this one and a little bit of a lighter variation. And is that a little bit cool? Yeah. So I can add a little touch of ultramarine also. It's a little bit too cool. I'll add a little bit of yellow ochre. Yeah, that's great. That's a light variation. Dark variation I need. Just make it a little bit gray. So we have magenta. If I add a little bit of green, the complementary of magenta, then we get that grayish kind of color that we need, I think. Or maybe it's already a little bit too much. So add it over there, add more magenta, and a little touch of white to slightly lighten it. But then we have some, yeah, some nice variations. It's a little bit too purple, so I'll add a little bit of yellow. Still, so. Yeah, that's better. Still a little bit. Okay, there we go. Yeah, okay. So, again, I've pre-mixed some colors so that I can paint more freely. First thing I want to do is just paint the darkest parts. So, these dark green like this. And you can just follow along, but I just do a little bit on intuition and just a little bit in the patterns that I see. So I don't brush in every leaf that I see, but I see, oh, okay, here they get slightly lighter sometimes. So then I add this color. And the dark, you see, when I paint on top of these dark colors, that recedes to the back, backwards. That is receding. So that's the nice thing about this. And here in front of the tree, I can also place some of these leaves. So we get a three-dimensional feel to it. Well, and I think this might already be quite enough. But you see, because we're layering these leaves with these dark leaves that were already there, then we get, yeah, we get layers, and that makes it three-dimensional. Now I go over to this very green color, and I see it at some spots, mainly here. So mainly at this side. So you can also wait till this layer is dry. I try to paint on top of it straight away because yeah, I'm filming. I don't have much time to stop and wait. I just want to continue. So maybe it will be a disaster, but I'll try. When I do it a little bit like this, and drop it on top here a little bit. Have to do it a little bit with confidence in one stroke, then it can be done. See, here I see almost nothing in front of it, but here it's a different story. We go all the way to in front of the door, like that, like this. But here in fact the colors are slightly lighter, but that doesn't matter. I'll put them on top of this shortly. So again, you just look a little bit to the patterns that you see, and well, we hope that no one is gonna count if all the leaves are correct. Now I get this one, it's more yellowish light kind of color, and I'll drop that at some spots. Oops, it's a little bit too vivid. I'll add more yellow ochre to it. See? And then at some spots I drop that on top of what I have already done. So and so. And here. Sometimes I paint a new leaf. Here I can paint some new leaves as well, you see. But that is just making use of layers. And while we are doing this, we keep in mind it is background work. So don't start detailing every leaf that you see. It is background work, so don't spend too much time on it. It sounds crazy, but that's the way it is. Now I head over to the lightest color that I have. So and I only at some spots here, but not that much. So I can do it, but it will become a little bit strange. But here mainly I see these rather light leaves at some spots, but well, I don't see them that much, to be honest. So it's fun to have it, but where do I put it? Well, like this maybe a little bit. That's already funny. And I get a slightly bigger brush for the flowers. Let me just drop in the darks first again. So although we don't see that much dark here, I just drop in myself, because there we see sometimes a little bit of these dark dots, so like that. And here some spots we see it coming through like that. But also here in front we can drop in just these dots, so I'll just do like this, and later on I will add light sides to it so that they become a little bit more three-dimensional. And again, that's the same story as with the leaves in the background. I just want to have something on that spot to give the depth that I need. So now I take this vivid color, and it is more vivid than on the photograph, but I don't care. See? And I do it like this a little bit. There I leave them. But when I do it a little bit careless, like this, I just drop it on top of the dark spots, then we get the effect of flowers, I hope. You see? So that was that, and now the lightest value, this one. And I mainly see it at the left side, of course. So at some spots I just add that very light value, like that. And that's enough. Now, I hope that was helpful. Enjoy painting and see you next time.